This video will inevitably include spoilers for stories in Final Fantasy XIV at varying levels of progression. What is it that really makes a fight in a video game memorable? Or more precisely, what is it that makes a fight memorable in Final Fantasy XIV? To some degree, the answer will probably be the same, although the exact proper answer may vary from person to person. So let's talk about some things that have produced some truly memorable fights in Final Fantasy XIV. And also some things that surprisingly ended up being less memorable. With that said, please tell me what makes a fight memorable to you in the comments, whether it is something that made a fight memorable in Final Fantasy XIV or a different game altogether. I would love to hear about it. Now then, there is a wide selection of things that can make a fight memorable, ranging from the music of the fight to the location, or even the story significance of the fight itself, perhaps even a unique mechanical detail in the fight. Or sometimes it is simply something the boss said.
Such devastation! This was not my intention!
I think the Ultima Weapon fight of A Realm Reborn is unreasonably memorable, simply because of it having the advantage of existing in a daily roulette where you have a 1 in 3 chance of pulling it, which, mind you, used to be a 50-50. However, the fight itself has nothing else particularly memorable about it as a whole besides the story significance and the quotes, which makes it both a good example and a bad example of a memorable fight in a way. For an example of how the music and mechanics meld together to make for a memorable fight, we have Alexander, A12, with this particular musical interaction. The way the music muffles and tones down as the time stops really underlines the mechanic and makes it way more memorable than if these two effects didn't work together. Even on normal, this particular mechanic is also probably the scariest mechanic in this specific fight, making that more memorable as well. You might not remember much of the Alexander fight off the top of your head, but I think most people remember the time stop. And to go even deeper than that into the mechanical memory of a fight, we have to look no further than any mechanic that is so universally well known that the name of the mechanic itself describes a type of mechanic, or otherwise is well known enough that the name is commonly used. For some good examples, we can look to Twintania's Twister from Binding Coils of Bahamut, or Alexander's Cruise Chaser's Limit Cut, a mechanic that is so universally described that the origin itself is easily forgotten. This is actually a common problem with memorable mechanics, because they can easily be separated from the fight itself, making the name of the mechanic what is memorable and not the fight itself. That is to say, a fight whose only truly memorable feature is a mechanic often doesn't lead to the fight being remembered for that. In fact, I'm pretty sure most people recognize Cruise Chaser far more for its music than specifically Limit Cut these days. An example of a fight that should be memorable, but doesn't really seem to be, at least to me, is the Shinryu fight from Stormblood. It is the climax of the story. It finishes on a specific story with Shinryu that started at the tail end of Heavensward, and it is even brought up again later as significant in Endwalker. But the fight itself doesn't really have anything particularly memorable once the new car smell has gone off. Or maybe that's just me. Perhaps the story significance of Shinryu is simply overshadowed by the other story beats surrounding it, the fight preceding its creation,
sloppy,
or the fight preceding Shinryu's fight itself, although not super memorable either. Being a fight players may have been looking forward to beat Xenos, could also overshadow it. Or perhaps the fact that Shinryu and Xenos is more like a detail in the specific fight where they're brought up again. Either way, this makes a fight that really should be memorable into something where when you get it in trial roulette, you get that reaction of, oh yeah, that is technically a trial, I suppose. In fact, of the 3 trials part of the leveling story of Stormblood, Shinryu is the only one that does not have voice acting. Beyond roaring, strangely, which means that it is far more likely that the reason it wasn't memorable was because a certain someone else
The seas part for we alone!
Was taking the spotlight with his overwhelming personality.
Wild and pure and forever free!
Alright, So what I'm getting at is that something that seems to really matter in making a fight really memorable is the fight being easily quotable in a language we understand, which is what makes a fight like Susanoo so memorable. Many random fights throughout Final Fantasy XIV that have gotten voice lines have simply become memorable, even when disconnected from the specific story event that makes them memorable.
Sickness must be purged!
And most of the time, these fights become memorable because of these quotes that we all memorize. It really underlines how much voice lines matter in making a boss fight truly memorable in a video game. It is what makes Ravana
Rejoice in the glory of combat!
more memorable than Bismarck, and what makes all of the Shadowbringers and Endwalker main story trials so memorable, with Titania's
Bigger's better.
innocence,
I see now. This is the passion of my ascension.
and of course all of Hades' mechanically relevant voice lines.
Scurry and scatter.
And that, in my opinion, is probably the most easily memorable way to use voice lines in a game. It warns you of a specific type of attack or mechanic coming up, so you learn to respond to the voice line specifically, and that makes you remember the voice line. And that is also something we've seen more and more throughout Endwalker. Let's take Zodiac as an excellent demonstration of this.
Will you live to see the end?
Is every time the multi-hit stack marker is used.
All in existence, bent to my will!
Is used when the platform spins, which is also just a little funny in its own right. And
Soon my hold over Zodiac shall be complete!
is actually a soft warning of the intermission cast coming up, which is then signified with
Mine! All mine!
I just love how mechanics can end up being known better for their voice line than the mechanic itself, or even its actual name. To build further on this, in Shadowbringers, the final boss of the second and third raid tiers are fully voice acted in this exact way, with clear mechanically related voice lines, and the savage parts are similarly fully voice acted.
The light shall usher in peace.
This has been built further upon in Endwalker, where, indeed, we can probably all agree that P4 has been far more easily forgotten due to the fight's complete lack of voice lines. Meanwhile, P8 and its savage version is, as expected, fully voice acted.
From fulgent flame my servants rise.
The warning and
Out of my sight!
the attack resolving. This makes this fight far more memorable than the tier preceding it, at least to me. And that is also why it made me so happy to discover that, for the first time ever, the final raid tier is all fully voice acted. For example, with Cocytus opening by reminding the hardcore Savage Raiders what they will be doing for week 1. Pandemonium actually giving you advice on what to do for mechanics.
Stay where you are.
Themis presenting you with an opportunity to simply tell him he's a liar.
I am the emissary, and I shall never die.
And of course, Athena reminds you of a very memorable quote in her own unique way.
From the deepest pit of the seven hells to the pinnacle of the heavens, the world shall tremble!
Unleash Ultima!
Not to forget an easily misheard quote.
Today my theory shall be proven as fact.
That is to say, I have a feeling, if this is going to be the new norm, I truly hope it is, that we will have far more quotable fights in the future, which leads to more fun, memes and creativity with these quotes that makes them even more memorable. So to finish, I want to bring up a memorable fight where both the story significance, the music, the location and the voice lines were perfect. A fight that refers back to an event that most of the player base either experienced nearly a decade prior or have heard of since, as the grand finale of that same story unfolds. The enemy on the back foot and flailing, yet still posing a real challenge, or, well, it does in a fair fight at least, as triumphant music plays. As they say, this was when the boss itself said, "Wait, why am I hearing boss music?" A truly memorable fight. And with that, I once again invite you to tell me stories of your most memorable fights in video games, whether they were Final Fantasy XIV or a different game. or whether you remember them for something the fight did, or something specific that happened unique to you. I would love to hear the stories, so be sure to tell me about them in the comments. And that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can make sure to let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, the Praetorium is a very strange dungeon. Not only did it used to be longer, as it has been separated into 2 parts, but it used to be 8-man. Even before those changes, however, it used to include response options in a very specific cutscene. With the slimming down of the dungeon, Gaius has stopped telling you that your choice is very glib, which is a shame, given that it is one of the most memorable quotes from that dungeon, alongside the one about devastation. An F in the chat for glib.